Welcome everybody to our board meeting. Particularly welcome to our visitors. Very nice to see you, and to our guests as well. We have two of our colleagues on the screen today, so they are behind you if you're sitting at that end. They're non-executives, Charlie Orton and Katie Capital, so they will contribute, and I will try and watch for their hand being raised at the time. So if you see me looking beyond you, it's not because I'm looking out, I'm just looking at the screen. We have apologies from Sarah Pinch. Declarations of interest, there are no new declarations that I've been notified. Has anyone got any declarations of interest for today's meeting to add? No. The minutes of the last meeting held in public. If we can just go through those. So page 1. Page 2, page 3, page 4, 5, page 6, 7, 8, and 9. Take the minutes as agreed. Thank you. And then the matters arising. Elaine,
yeah,
from the action log.
Thank you, Chair. So the first three items are all scheduled for future meetings, and the fourth item, being the people and culture strategy, is on the agenda for discussion later this meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. I've not been notified of any other business at this time, so we will move on to our service story. And I think Truth's going to introduce it, but you're very welcome.
Yes, thank you. I'd really like to extend a warm welcome to Kai and Amy, who are part of the trans community. And I've also invited colleagues from the Women, Children's and Family Service and the Sexual Health Service, because actually this is about understanding how we engage with the community. A slide deck has been prepared and we won't have a chance to go through all of that in detail, but it is important that we provide an update from the service about the gender pathway, and we can perhaps share some of the difficulties that there are in that pathway at the moment and how we are working through some of that. But I think the focus, because Kai and I met that month ago, Kai? And actually what we wanted to do was really shape the discussion about how we engage with the community and what works from both sides in terms of that co-production piece moving forward. So we've got about 10 minutes, and I don't know whether you want to sort of, share your experiences first, and then obviously the service can then update as to what some of those pathway considerations are.
Yeah, so we weren't sure what to expect today, so I've just introduced myself as Kai Barretto. I use my pronouns are they, them. I'm a youth worker outside of this, and this is my colleague.
I'm Amy, pronouns are she, her. I work in both security as well as an exam invigilator for the exam board. And it's myself and Kai that run the online trans community over Discord and WhatsApp, and part of a larger group that also runs the Facebook group as well.
And you can see on the second page that we did a kind of a brief basics, so some of this terminology and language that we use, so we just want to make sure that everybody's, singing from the same hymn sheet, essentially. Nothing like understanding or anything like that, but that's just sort of using and referring to. It's also a free resource online, very easy and accessible for all kinds of age groups as well. I would highly recommend it. It's a very simplified way of explaining gender and identity. And then the following slide that we have on there is UK figures. So there's just an example of a few data that has been collected, across the UK, which is fantastic. But unfortunately, we don't have anything like that on the Isle of Man. And that's something that would truly benefit the trans and non-binary community, and yourselves as well, to be able to evidence, the practicality and use of the facilities that may be provided and used by those who are trans and non-binary. I was going to bring things out after that, but like I wasn't even request. Sorry, thank you. But yeah, other than language and terminology, data is just as important as well. data, we have a survey.
So earlier on in the year, I did a survey across the trans community that we had access to online. The survey ran for 2 weeks. 43 people responded. The largest number of respondents we had were in the 18 to 24 group. The survey was shared primarily across all social media, so Discord, WhatsApp. And the survey covered a range of topics, but not limited to the NHS care pathway, private care pathway, GPs, options, and proposed changes on the NHS pathway. What the survey showed is there is an overwhelming negative response, negative experience that trans people have faced when trying to access gender affirming care, with 69.8% of respondents not currently receiving any kind of gender affirming care, with some putting off accessing care by the issues that are currently faced by the community when approaching their GP. For instance, one respondent stated that it felt like a new concept to their GP, that they were made to feel like a fascinating new toy and asked invasive and inappropriate questions. This respondent also reported a lack of understanding and patience to learn in regards to gender affirming care. Another respondent stated that their GP told them that the real reason why no one would prescribe them hormones is because no one was bothered to read the 15-page shared care agreement form. We have another respondent that reports that CAMS, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, lied and wasted their time for 2.5 years telling the respondent that they were on the waiting list to be seen by a gender clinic, and then they later discovered that no such referral had taken place. This, combined with the waiting times, made the respondent feel that they had no choice but to go down the private route. The survey also covered those currently receiving private care, with the largest reason for going private being a lack of available support or understanding of trans issues from medical professionals on the island. One respondent reported that no GP they approached was willing to engage in shared care for fear of losing their job. So they're having to fund their own transition on minimum wage at a detriment to themselves financially, or even worse, respondents reporting that they feel they have no choice but to go down the self-med route and get their hormones off the dark net, which obviously any medical professional will know is highly dangerous because you don't know what it is that you're getting. One respondent reported that the GP in practice lied to them about being on the system in the waiting list, and it wasn't until this GP retired that the truth of their situation had come to light. What this survey shows is that there is not only a desperate need for gender affirming care on the island, but a desperate need also for appropriate training for medical professionals, and when it comes to dealing with trans healthcare issues. Numerous respondents who are or would have been under the age of 18 at the time reported that being immediately referred to CAMS, only to find that CAMS wasn't able to help them in any way. However, contrary to these negative experiences, some respondents have reported some positive experiences with GPs going above and beyond to actually try and educate themselves. So my GP, Dr. Peacock at Snowfall Surgery, is a good example of that. She really didn't know very much about trans healthcare issues at all, and she has tried contacting gender clinics in England for advice, tried contacting other doctors. She's gone out of her way to really try and educate herself, but ultimately also holds her hand up and says that, you know, her hands and what she can do are tied by the current system that we have here on the island. Out of all the respondents, 28.6 are saying that they've had to wait 5 years or longer for any kind of access to any kind of care. What's the other thing? With 70% saying that they initially did try to go through the NHS, but said that due to transphobic experiences from healthcare and mental health professionals, lack of understanding, lack of access to any kind of pathway, that they have had no choice but to go private. Yeah, that's kind of the time constraints, main points I wanted to go over.
Thank you, Amy.
But if you have any
Really
questions,
helpful to just set those context and hear the feedback from the survey. I wonder now whether it would be pertinent to hand over to the service so we get an update on what that pathway looks like, and then perhaps if we can talk about what the future looks like, because obviously Linda and I have met with you, Kai, and I think we've got some ideas about how we at least get some of that engagement. And certainly education is key here, isn't it? And the education, understanding and sharing that across all of our health professionals, but also how we can support and aid data collection so we actually have a better understanding of what we need here on the island. So I don't know whether, I mean, we've got a number of professionals from the team. I don't know who wants to sort of give the overview of that.
I'm happy to, sorry, I wasn't expecting to talk today, but very happy to give an update from our work in the sexual health clinic and the lead nurse. Sexual health inherited a waiting list from the mental health service when it was reclassified as a sexual health issue. So we now have a waiting list of people waiting for referral to transitioning services in the UK. We've got some people who have already been seen, some people who haven't been seen, some people who thought they were on the waiting list and weren't on the waiting list. We've inherited a whole heap of issues that we're trying to untangle and try and help people on the waiting list. So everybody that we are aware of, we have written to every individual patient and offered them sexual health support because, again, our hands are tied as to what we can offer as a sexual health service. So we have written to everybody, offered them any support from a sexual health point of view. The people in this community are probably a very vulnerable group of people who need an extra layer of support on the sexual health issues. So we've offered that support to them, vaccines, health advice, PrEP, in order to protect their health. But as we've all heard, there isn't a pathway, so that's as far as we can go from the patient point of view. And then Liza, beside me, Women's and Children's, we've worked together. Liza's going to do a project about educating Manx care staff about how we receive patients, how we. When you boil it down, it's a very basic concept of the Manx care principles, treating everybody as an individual and with kindness and being respectful. And we've a long way to go, I think. Pronouns and things like that are the tip of the iceberg, I think. I think attitudes and caring is what we all need to demonstrate, I think.
So as a working group, which Teresa asked us to do, we've had some meetings, whether they've been virtual or in person. And from a project lead perspective, because sexual health services currently sits under the care group, Liza Munro has reached out and embraced the trans community to determine how we can improve that going forward. So if you just want to give us a bit overview.
Yeah, so basically we have around about 200 potentially people on the island who, that's an approximate number, who were found and have some issues with gaining care within our services as well. So what we want to do is implement some gender identity awareness, and that's to all Manx care staff. And it does basically, as Amanda said, begins with the very basic human necessity of kindness and acceptance and understanding the simple things to, you know, reach out and give inclusivity, basically. We know that the community is not always reaching out because of fear, because of concerns about how they will be treated within services. So we need to break those barriers down, and that we can do with working with the community about how we do that in a really inclusive manner.
So you've reached out to the DHSC.
Yeah, we are working with DHC and obviously education as well to try and put together a really robust programme that we can run across Manx care. So
We're looking at some workshops starting within the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks to commence the process.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, obviously, it is the Department of Health and Social Care who are responsible for the pathway, the broader pathway work with NHS England, and I think we're all very excited on that and trying to influence that in the right direction. But I do feel it's really important that we have this engagement with the community, that the community feel actually Manx Care and all of its contractors. I think I extend that to all of the contractors who Manx Care work with, and I'm sure Dr. Ellis will support that from a GP perspective. It's really important that we have that awareness, that engagement, and that you feel we can do as much as we can locally to support the community moving forward. So, I mean, I'm certainly encouraged from the time we met, Kai, and there's an event in November that we're going to work with you on. So, you know, whilst I think there's an acceptance, there are some broader pathway limitations at the moment that we need to work through with the department and with NHS England. At an operational level, there are a lot of things we can do to hopefully improve the experience of the community and your engagement with the organisation. So thank you very much for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Kai and Amy. Thank you. Really helpful slides and really helpful presentation. I'm really pleased that we're beginning the education route, because I think that's how you start to build allyship and support and respect. I'm really pleased to hear the word kindness used as well, because it's an underestimated value in terms of how we care for each other. So I'll open it to some comments and questions. Miriam, then Tim.
Thank you for coming along. It's really good to meet you. My name's Miriam Keppel. I'm the Executive Director for People and Workforce. I'm really particularly interested in the education piece, because over the last few months we have launched an Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Forum for staff within Manx Care, and we have had a number of people come forward who would like to be part of setting up a staff network for people from the trans community who might work amongst the organisation. So I'd like to extend an invite for you to come along to the Equality and Inclusion Forum to meet along with some staff members who are really wanting to drive that kind of education piece from the inside out as well. So let's connect up the work streams, because I think that would be really useful.
Tim?
Hi, I'm Tim, pronouns he, him. Thank you very much for your presentation. As a gay man who came out in the 1970s, a long time ago, I'm just aware how much one has to come out again and again and again, and explain again and again and again, and to rebut assumptions that are made again and again and again. So I think the work which is being done, particularly just around accessing services, is really important, and the response that everybody in the community gets when they access the services, that assumptions aren't made, and that the kindness is there and respect is there. And I want to ensure that went across to social care as well. That's one of my sort of nightmare scenarios for myself, is ending up in a residential care home for older people and not being out again. And sort of those assumptions which are made. So really great for the whole of Manx Care, and not forgetting all the day services and the supporting people's own homes and everything. But really great that you've come today, and thank you very, very much for highlighting this, and it's something which we need to be reminded of again and again and again. So that's great. Thank you.
Can I just make a comment? Sorry, I forgot to mention something very important. When we move into our new premises for integrated sexual health, we're going to start a trans and non-binary sexual health clinic, and Kai and friends, the community, have come up with a name for that service. They want it to have its own identity, so that when they phone, they don't have to explain to anybody on reception what clinic they want. And it's got, I can't remember the Manx name for it, but it means new horizons. So the clinic is going to be New Horizons, probably shortened to the Horizon Clinic. So they'll just be able to phone up and say, can we make the Horizon Clinic? Everybody nice and fitting name for a new service.
Yeah, thank you, that's really helpful. Thank you. Katie on the screen, so you don't have to turn around because her voice will come through.
You know me. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Kai and Amy. I'm in a fairly unique position in as much that I have a trans family member, and I just wanted to emphasise the importance of not only supporting the individuals but the families as well, because there's a great deal of education that needs to happen in a lot of families. A lot of families don't know how to react. A lot of families don't know what support to give. Obviously, and Tim sort of touched on a little bit about the fact you need to keep reiterating things. There's also bad behaviours and bad reactions, and you need to be able to cope with that as well. So I wanted to say thank you. Know that you've got an ally, and if anybody's interested, on my LinkedIn profile, Sasha has put a story of his journey, if you like, and it's very touching and very moving and very educational. So if anybody wants to look at that, then go to my LinkedIn profile. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Tim, sorry, last point from.
Just very quickly, sorry, Chair, I know you want to move on. Just say thank you very much. My name's Tim, he, him, and very keen to offer my support. I'm responsible for social care, mental health, safeguarding, as some colleagues will know. Don't want to talk about details here because it wouldn't be right, but very keen to be involved and support you on your journey. I'm conscious the services I'm responsible for relate to that, but also I've got a wider leadership role on the island, so very, very keen to do that. So
Yeah,
thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I hope that what we demonstrate here is the point of having guests come and talk about experiences. And you've seen the richness around the board table of offers and linkages, and it really helps us knit things together, hearing from people who've got lived experience. So thank you very much indeed. Look forward to hearing about New Horizons Clinic, and I look forward to your future links with some of the work that we're leading on diversity here in the organisation. So thank you for coming. I hope it hasn't been too daunting.
Thank you. Just add one
Of course.
My email should be on the presentation. If anybody wants access to the raw data from the survey, I'm happy to provide that. I can either provide a summary document or I can provide the raw data itself. The raw data talks a lot about GP experiences, mental health experiences, and it kind of covers a lot of things across the board that I think most people for their different departments in here would find interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually any questions as well. My email's on there as well.
Yeah.
Together, you know, it takes a village. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you for your comments. Now we've got a future challenge. My old friend, colleague, Dr. Mandel Deb, is coming to talk about the WHO HIV strategy. And this is really about where we sit, how we get prepared for, I think it's 2030, isn't it? So that a while ago that seemed a long way away, but now it seems very, very close. So thank you, Deb, and we'll hand over to you, and then no doubt there'll be some discussion afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, quite a few familiar faces. So that's me, and I'm going to talk about the current state of preparedness for a global target on HIV, where we are at. Next slide, please. So that's the background, really. As you can see, that currently PLWH means people living with HIV, and there are 40 million now, and just a bit more than that have died over the years since it started in early 80s. And only in 2023, there were 1.3 million new infections globally. And in the UK, it will show later on. So in Africa, there are, of that 40 million, main burden in Africa, we all know that, 26 million and they have the 50% of global new HIV infection burden. And of the people who are known to be HIV positive or diagnosed in Africa, 77% of them are on treatment. That is a very significant element of HIV control, which will become a bit more clear later on. In the UK, currently about 106,000, just a bit more than that, living with HIV, and it is estimated that in England, there are 4,400 undiagnosed HIV people in the community. So they don't know and nobody else does. There is a way of working this out. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot of, over the years, the new infection in different exposure category. Just to give you a flavor. The important bit here is you can see the sex between men and women actually peaked higher than between men at some point. Come down now. So that's just to show that it is not just an infection for the gay people, as thought at the beginning. Next slide, please. So how is HIV transmitted? It's pretty simple, really. It's by exchange of body fluid. So if one person has HIV, so their body fluids, various body fluids have various degree of HIV in it, and it would be transmitted to somebody who is not HIV positive if there is an exchange of body fluid. And sexual exposure is one example of them, blood transfusion is another one of them, etc. There is no known HIV transmission through saliva. So that's quite reassuring. Next slide, please. So the goal by 2030 is that this incredible goal, and that by then, goal is there should not be any new HIV infection. That's a bit different from new diagnosis, because many diagnoses we can work out that they are not newly infected. They were in the past, just being tested and found positive. So the target is about new HIV infection. So somebody has been HIV negative and has become HIV positive. So that's the scenario, that's the challenge. And it is possible, but by no means certain. We have to work very hard for it. The next slide, please. So what is the state of preparedness now? So these are the tools that we have in our store to use. Condom promotion, so that to some extent is not 100%, but to a large extent prevents fluid exchange. And then we need to find cases by doing tests and offering it to everybody, because there are nearly 4,500 unknown, undiagnosed HIV somewhere lurking around. And we need 100% access to treatment. Now, why that is important? Because the treatment goal for HIV is to make everybody who is on treatment, their virus level undetectable. It's not negative, but undetectable, which means that the testing system can only detect about 40 copies, 40 to 50 in a test. So when it is undetectable, it means it is somewhere between 0 and 50. And at that state, they cannot transmit to anybody. So current practice is not to advise using condom for HIV prevention to somebody who is on treatment and who has sustained undetectable virus. They do not need to use condom. They would not be able to transmit. There has not been a single case. So we use a term in our jargon, U equals U, which means that whoever has viral transmission, meaning undetectable, is unable to transmit. So that's a very important tool we have. And then the PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV, which is for primary prevention. it's almost like using condom, but actually PrEP is cheaper than condom, as it turns out. So somebody has to take one tablet every day. So that's one way. And or they can use it on urine waste, which is only 3 days in a row at a certain time. So these are and also Pepsi is there, which is post-exposure prophylaxis, which means that somebody has already been exposed to a known HIV or somebody with high risk HIV epidemiologically. So there is a way of managing that, provided they access the service within 72 hours in the UK. Some other countries it's less than that. So that's a course of treatment for 1 month. That rate has fallen down dramatically because PrEP is there now, very widely used. So the next slide. So we currently have 100% treatment. We currently have 100% on viral suppression, and we have got PrEP. So we have got the main 3 tools that is required to prevent any new transmission in the community. So in terms of cost, which people might be interested to know, anybody can hazard a guess for the treatment for drug cost for HIV. We have got about 50 odd people in our book who are on treatment. Any idea for anybody? Next slide, please. So that is just under 240,000 pounds a year. So that was in 2023. That's the amount of cost one has to bear when somebody becomes positive. So there's a huge financial burden. This is for life. Nobody's dying anymore. So we must prevent any HIV transmission at any cost if we can, not just for financial, but also their effect on individual level too. Any idea how much does it cost? Some of you might know because I have been shouting about it.
Would that be £3,000, do I imagine?
Next slide, please.
Who was going to answer that?
Next slide, yes. That was 3,106 pounds in a whole year for the whole number of PrEP people. So it's the proof that prevention is not only better but cheaper for everybody as well. Right, next slide, please. So what is underpinning our motivation that in a small island we are just putting so much effort to achieve the target, global target. Next slide, please. That's because we believe in thinking globally and acting globally. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. That was, as it brings me back to my past listening to you teach me. So thank you. That was an excellent overview. But I also think it was an incredibly helpful reminder that 30 years from now, if we in Manx Care haven't grasped population medicine, prevention, delivering care differently, we're overwhelmed. So that your final slide, the differential in cost of treatment and cost of prevention, is a really strong message for us. Regardless of all of the commissioning arguments and the who pays for what, I think fundamentally for a board that's an integrated health and care board, that's the message. So I guess the question is, what more should we in Manx Care be doing, either as advocates to our colleagues in government or for our own systems here? And do you think we have the capacity to do that at the moment? Is it inbuilt into our systems?
Yes, it is actually, and I mean, I'm not asking for any resource because we can do it. We have been doing it, and it's just a matter of keep doing it. There is no relaxation on that. And also, this is HIV treatment and prevention. I mean, STI control is one of the major prevention tools for HIV transmission as well. I didn't put in the list, but that is also the case. So we need to have a very effective service for sexual health, which will by definition put a negative pressure on HIV growth, which we are doing, and just keep doing it. And more we put our effort and investment in prevention, which would be minuscule really in terms of treatment category, the better it is.
Thank you. I'll open up to questions. Ollie?
Thank you. Thank you for that talk. That was really interesting and helpful. Should say I'm Oliver Ellis. I'm Director for Primary Care and a GP in Peel. I wonder if you could say, you mentioned about people living with HIV who are undiagnosed in the UK. Do you think that there are people in the Isle of Man who might be living with HIV who are undiagnosed? And do you think that there's something about the amount of testing that the broader health service is doing, and if that needs to, any improvements need to be made?
Yes, I am certain, although I cannot prove it, that there will be undiagnosed people in the Isle of Man, because the risk group is here, and not all of them have gone through our hands. Increasingly more because of the situation with, or at least the publicity for Mpox. People are coming forward asking for vaccination, etc. In other words, they are coming in contact with our service, and that's all we need. Once there is the contact, everything else will follow. So there are vaccination for hepatitis B, for example, vaccination for human papillomavirus, all sorts of things happen as soon as they make contact with us. And so we need to maintain that. And, you know, we are very happy to take referrals for this kind of prevention work, which is our core business. What more can be done? There is one thing that needs to be done actually, which is that over the years, I have been with this service since 1998. We have never achieved the common UK target of 48-hour access to our service. We have never achieved it. So we have got now a restructure being announced in Manx, and we will be starting with a new hope and fresh idea. And I really want to wage a war against the waiting time we have. Just need to bring it down. It's not good enough. And that is my first effort will be from next month. We have not achieved the 48-hour access yet.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Can I ask
Of course.
about GPs? We took part in a GP education session one time, and I was asking the question about any people who move to the Isle of Man, if they register with a GP surgery, what is their general health checkup, and were they, if they were from high-risk countries, were they offered HIV testing? And I think not. I don't know. Are we missing a trick really? Because I know we've had a couple, haven't we, that have moved over from elsewhere, and then we sort of subsequently found out that they were HIV positive, and if they've been picked up as part of that, they relocate to the Isle of Man. And they get it. I don't know if that's realistic or.
I think that's a really important point. To my knowledge, it's not something that's typically routinely done.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really important point, and I think the point about testing for HIV, not obviously it's very important within the sexual health clinics, but also more broadly across the health service, because you know the lab must. I don't know how many how many vials of blood the lab handles per day, but it's quite a lot. And you know, adding some additional. This is, I guess, is a question for you. Is there benefit in doing more HIV testing?
I think if you detect anybody, then yes.
Yeah.
Then you prevent onward transmission, and it's a whole cycle, isn't it? Of protecting the health of that individual and others as well. But I think we've done education within the hospital as well, just even patients admitted to the ward, there's actually some clinical indicators, isn't there, where an HIV test should be part of the differential that's offered, and it's not, as far as we can see. We had one of the junior doctors try to do an audit of, they were waiting through treacle with so many conditions that the audit was way too massive. But really, when we've tried to do it on like World AIDS Day, we had a stand in the dining room and had a thing specifically for healthcare professionals. This is a list of, if any of your patients have got any of these, you should be thinking of doing an HIV test. I think we live in the Isle of Man and everybody thinks it doesn't apply here. We're not the same as everywhere else, but we are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Final comments, Deb.
Just a quick comment on that area is that there is a thing that we get very twitched about, and there is a public health target as well in the UK. I don't know about here. Is late diagnosis. Late diagnosis means somebody has been diagnosed late on immunosuppression state. So once that happens, there is a cutoff point. Once that happens, now we would be track backwards to look at every missed opportunity that the patient had to be tested and was not tested. So that's the national thing that we are doing at the moment. We haven't had any lately here now.
Thank you. Well, thank you for a really helpful presentation and a reminder of the importance of this. You'll be invited back to the board because I think you're the first and only person who's ever said they don't want any more resources. So we'll make sure you're invited back. But seriously, I do think that the conversation around PrEP is really helpful for us in terms of looking at not just our investment in the hotel, but what we're here for. I do think there's an opportunity now with the newly appointed Director of Public Health for the Isle of Man, who obviously sits in the Cabinet Office. I'm not sure when he's actually started yet. He's about to start. But I think it's a really great opportunity for us to start being one of the bits of the system that glues us all together. So very helpful indeed. Thank you. And really nice to see you, Deb.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and thank you for lunch yesterday.
Thank you.
I was told that there is some more left for today.
Yes. It's got my name on it, but thank you very much. That was very generous. Thank you.
That is my pastime. So somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Right, so we now come to one of the first follow-up items from my time as chair. If you remember, we looked at the board assurance framework risks around estates and estates management. The board asked for further information and an overview of our strategic aims and the risks within the system that manages estates. So Jackie, I think you're leading on this first.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So yes, we have initiated or come for approval today to add a risk to our board assurance framework, specifically relating to estates. So this work has been done. It's been through finance performance and commissioning subcommittee also. But I think we've referenced it obliquely in a number of other conversations, but it became clear that it's an entire risk in itself. So there's a number of issues for us. Our estates are managed on our behalf through a shared service agreement with the Department of Infrastructure. And that presents us with a number of challenges. The first is we don't really have the kind of detailed oversight and understanding of our estate that we would want to have. That's not something the department have ever really been able to provide for us in a detailed, meaningful way. And by that, I mean a really detailed understanding of what properties we own, what they are consisted of, what condition they are in, what they are being used for, what their potential uses are, and what their utilization is. They're all really important, basic things to understand in terms of what we have. So that's one piece of risk, is that we don't fully understand in the way that we would want to what we have available to us and requires. The second piece is the management and upkeep of that estate
is done through the Department of Infrastructure. We don't have visibility of what the assigned budget for that is. The government a number of years ago carried out what they called its strategic needs analysis across its entire estate. And that suggested a rather large number, multiple millions per year, to maintain our estate. And we don't have understanding or knowledge of if that number is available. It's definitely not ring fenced for our estate. So we have very grave difficulty in understanding what funding is available to just maintain our estate. So that's not about changing things or building new things or amending things. That's, you know, repairing the roof, keeping the floors done, all of the normal maintenance. What we have found with a number of our properties is that at a point at which a property stops being used actively, maintenance on that property also stops. And therefore we've had issues where when we come to bring a property back into use after a period of time, because the maintenance is not being carried out, then significant investment is then needed in that property to bring it back into use. That wouldn't be necessary if the maintenance had been carried out. So regular basic maintenance of our estate is a large issue for us. We work very closely with the department and get that visibility. They have their own challenges, and funding will be an issue for all departments. And I know that the challenges we have with our estate in this regard are not unique to me. And it's a wider issue across government estate. Then we also have a question about how we develop our estate and maximise the use of our estate. And that comes to planning. And so the first two are very important elements of that. But the third part, which is within our control, which we're starting to try and work through, is what are our requirements? So, you know, when you're planning your estate, you need to know what you've got and you need to know what you need, and then you try and manage the gap between the two. So what we have done is we have initiated an estate strategy group within Manx Care, whose job is A, to establish the facts of the matter and develop that basic understanding of our estate, but B, then to start that, taking that operational planning, that future planning, and starting to feed that into our requirements. At the moment, our estates management is entirely reactive to the needs of the organisation, rather than looking forward 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. They're the time frames you need to be looking at for estates. Not able to do that. So we are very immature. We are just beginning to do that. So that's why I think it's a big risk for us as an organisation for a number of reasons. We run the risk of having an estate that is not fit for purpose. And I know that we do have issues across our estate, particularly some regulatory and inspection issues that we're aware of, that I wouldn't say we're non-compliant, but there are risks there in terms of the quality of the estate. We have much of our estate that's not available to us because it would cost too much to bring back into service. So we have issues around compliance and safety and fit for purpose. We also have issues around capacity. So an inability to occupy our estate in an ever-growing organisation is really, really difficult. And so we wanted to make sure that the board were fully sighted on those risks and were managing those actively. In common with a lot of some of these functions is we are reliant very heavily on our shared services agreement and our shared services partners in DOI. And we are trying hard to manage that relationship, but ultimately it tends to come back to capacity, resource and funding. So that's just a brief overview. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, that's incredibly helpful, and I think it sort of captures the anxieties that were expressed around the board last time. So I'll open up to questions. Kate.
Jackie, thank you. That was really helpful. And when you were talking about backlog maintenance in July, the National Audit Office in the UK published a report showing that backlog maintenance in the NHS has now tipped over 11 billion, just to bring it up to the very basic level of safety. My query was around the compliance, and obviously some of the compliance with estates fits into the quality sort of area as well. And it was just whether, in fact, through potentially the quality committee, we should maybe be examining a compliance dashboard that sort of showed where we've got areas of concern. And I appreciate some of the responsibility for compliance doesn't sit with this organisation, but clearly having visibility on it might be helpful.
I think, yes, I think ultimately responsibility for compliance does rest with us, even if it's executed on our behalf.
Yes.
As our shared service partner. So the responsibility absolutely sits with us.
And Jackie, is the, in terms of the contract with shared services, is that explicit in the contract in terms of what their responsibilities are?
Yes and no. The shared services agreement and arrangement is the subject of much discussion right now, and we haven't quite agreed. And again, part of the reason why we haven't been able to come to an agreement with the department is around their anxiety about their ability to actually meet our needs. And that's the big part of it. But in terms of the compliance issue, what we're trying to do is we have asked Treasury, because this is all Treasury's estate ultimately, and we've asked Treasury and the DOI, we require a comprehensive review of our estate to tell us all of these things. So not just the size and shape of it, but all of that compliance, fire, water, health and safety, building regulations, all the environmental controls, all of that we need. They've told us, not unsurprisingly, that that's a huge piece of work, and they're unlikely to be able to conduct that in the time frame that we were talking multiple years. So there's a potential decision. Well, it is a decision, but I think it's a bit of a non-decision really. We as an organisation, I think, have to take that matter into our own hands and make that necessary investment to do that quickly.
Well, particularly if the accountability lies with us.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think this is where some of these discrepancies and some of these deficiencies are resulting in pressure on our revenue budget. So that's an investment that typically Manx Care shouldn't really have to make, because its shared service function should be providing it for it. But because we hold ultimate accountability, we cannot carry that risk, and we need to make that. So we are initiating a programme of full, trying to remember the acronym now, but it's the mechanism that's used in the NHS. So it's specifically healthcare targeted. So it's not just a bricks and mortar piece. It also talks about utilisation, and it looks at it from a clinical perspective. So we can devise whether places are suitable for clinical or non-clinical.
Tim, then Sheila.
Thanks, Chair. Just to fully support Jackie, obviously we've lots of conversation about this at the Executive Leadership Committee, and from a social care point of view in particular, you know, there are a range of risks built in to the way we deliver services at the moment, which, you know, we're very keen to work with Jackie to try and find a solution to. And as colleagues will know, we get those played back in regulation and inspection,
Yes.
registration inspection reports. So it's very frustrating for colleagues working on the ground to get a kind of very strong critique on some of those things that aren't working when there's limits to what they can do within those settings. So obviously some of our most vulnerable children and adults are in those settings. So very, very keen to support Jack and the board in this space.
Sheila?
Just a couple of things, Chair. I agree with Kate that there is a real safety quality element to this, and I think water safety comes into this arena that we were talking about yesterday. And it would be quite easy through an estate strategy plan to be able to take out those areas for us to look at going forward. I suppose the second thing for me, that this is on our board assurance framework, that there's a shared risk, isn't there, in terms of ourselves and the shared service, Department of Health and Social Care. So I'd be interested to know what they've got on their risk register and how that correlates with, that's the good governance bit, how our governance, our risk rating and content on the BAF correlates to theirs as well. I think that's really.
I would suggest that there isn't.
So we need to have a conversation about that, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Wendy, yes, thank you. So thank you, Jackie. It was a great presentation, and obviously I'm very familiar with it because you've already brought it. We've already debated it at FP&C. But so I'm very much in favour of escalating this risk to our board assurance framework. But what concerns me is what are we actually going to do about it? because, you know, I absolutely laud the fact that you've set up an estate strategy group. This is great. You're already highlighting opportunities for vacant properties that can be disposed of and the money put to use, the right kind of use. And you know, I go back to when I was first appointed as the director of Manx Care. When I toured the property, people said, give us fit for purpose estate and give us fit for IT, fit for purpose IT. Those are the two big things that were coming loud and clear from our staff and our workforce. And this is a step in the right direction, but in my humble opinion, not far enough. I think we really need to escalate this, because this is yet another example of where we are being constrained by systemic issues, indigenous in the system that we're working with. And part of our job, I see, is that we need to bring about change in that. And therefore we need to escalate it. And I'm thinking about, do we need to call a meeting with the DOI to inter alia review our shared services agreement, but also get these issues on the table and say, what are we jointly going to do about it? Because it's not just our problem, it's your problem as well, but it's a problem where we have perceptive responsibility and real responsibility without the power. And that's the Spider-Man comment. You can't have power without responsibility, and vice versa. So I think we really need to think about what we do about this and where we take it.
So if I could, we're already on that, Nigel. So we have had a number of sessions with the Department of Health, with DOI and with Treasury, specifically to talk about the capital and estate process, because we all recognise that it's not doing what we need it to do. Quite complicated to unpick who's responsible for what in the circumstances. But I think ultimately, to move this situation forward, what we as an organisation need to do is to come to the table with a really clear ask. At the moment, what we're saying is it's not working for us. We can point to specific instances and failures, but what we need to come to is say, this is what we need, a bit like we do with our revenue bids now every year. Really lay that out very, very firmly. And so the first part of that is understanding what we've got and simply saying, what we want to do is, my view is that there's items in there where we would want to consolidate our estate, so there's stuff that will never really fit our purpose. So let's not waste our money in trying to maintain that estate. Then there's disposals. There's a conversation to be had about how making some of those disposals could be utilised in terms of using that capital funding released to then invest in our estate. At the moment, the process is when the property is disposed, because it's a government property, that the proceeds of that flow back into central government. So unlike normal NHS trust where you could dispose of your land or your buildings and then you would use that in your budget, that flow doesn't happen. So there's definitely a high level discussion to be had with Treasury from a very strategic point of view that says, we have identified these properties that we don't believe are of benefit or of use to us, or that we believe actually are valuable enough to generate a significant income if we were to sell it on the market. So let us do that, and then let us use that funding to make the necessary investments that we've identified in our estate, simply to bring it up to standard. Then during that time, we do our operational planning and we start to develop that 5, 10, 15, 20-year vision of what our estate needs to look like. We also need to build in the whole sustainability piece. Again, we've got a lot of our properties are old. They're not built for this sort of thing. They're expensive to run. They're inefficient to run. They use a lot of energy. And so we can reduce the footprint and reduce the cost of running our estate by investing in better estate, more modern estate. And that's the big conversation we need to have. But to begin with that, we have to have a really coherent proposition.
Final comment from Miriam.
Yeah, just to say, like Tim, I'm very keen to work with Jackie on this and to involve the Equality and Inclusion Forum in the discussions, because there's quite a barrier with a number of our pieces of estate in terms of inclusion and accessibility. It's a daily challenge. So it is something that I think should be high on the agenda.
And one of the key challenges for us, even in terms of condition, is flexibility. Our estate is not sufficiently flexible. We as an organisation are constantly moving, constantly changing, constantly developing. We have to assume that we will be consistently moving pieces around the board, and therefore our estate has to be maximally flexible. buildings, generally speaking, don't offer.
Okay, thank you. Really helpful discussion and comments from people. I think certainly, I think there's agreement that this is at the level it needs to go on our BAF. I think your point, Sheila, as well made about how our BAF and how our governance of that relates to others, and that's part of what we're in the process of BAF review. But we need to use the BAF as a tool as well as a marking point for us on the board. It's not just an image-based thing. I think there are two things from the board. I think we do need assurance that we are safe and that the regulatory requirements are met. And I think that is our responsibility. And frankly, we may as well take it now and do it now, because we know it will be done well to the standard we require and that we are absolutely clear about that. So I think the board would want to see that relatively quickly. I think the higher strategic aim is working with DOI, Department of Health and Treasury around how do we create an estate strategy that works for Manx Care, that also works for the rest of government, who will always have some management input to this. I like your idea of the NHS being able to sell property. Most of it's owned by Henry VIII, and we can't sell it because it's some sort of charitable thing. But there are some opportunities for income generation, but also repurposing of buildings. And indeed, that shared aim of what does the island need? We don't have to own a building to be part of the occupancy of that. So I think there's a multi-layers of how we do this. I would ask that we see the safety and regulatory process split into your world, Tim, the social care world and the health world. So two different regulatory processes, and we can't miss either. And I think the board would like to see that assurance within the next 3 months, because I do think that there are some, if we are to invest in change to meet those requirements, we need to know about it.
I just wanted to pick up on something you said, because it needs to be strategically part of the island plan in terms of all estate, looking across the piece and planning on that basis. So it needs to go to that highest level. So I completely agree.
I think as well, Tim, in terms of our future needs, particularly in the arena of self-supply in terms of that move away from residential and more towards supported living, that's a massive challenge, and that's something we have to have.
Just very quickly, Chair, on that one, the shift to locality working and the push towards early intervention might, there are some alignment there for us. We need to think about that thing strategically. So that's a good point.
Thank you. And I think that this is exactly the sort of discussion that can help our partners in government have their more formed discussions around this. So thank you. We're moving on. So my report. Very briefly, I've had the usual number of meetings with interesting people. I'm going to the what cafe's called?
It's Santander.
Santander MCAS Cafe in London tomorrow to meet the MCAS team and some of the public there. But I want to focus today on the board and in particular non-executive's response to some of the issues that have been raised on social media and indeed the personal named attacks. It is inappropriate for named individuals to be bullied and attacked in any way, and we have a zero tolerance of that in our organisation. And as a board, we want to offer our full support to all our executives who are doing an extremely challenging job in extremely challenging circumstances. Everybody that lives on the Isle of Man understands all the pressures here. They're not unique to the Isle of Man, but the way we treat each other as public servants, at the very least, it should be with respect. I will be writing to our Chief Executive expressing the board's full support, not only in the way she delivers for Manx Care and has delivered over the last 3 years, but also in the way in which she conducts herself and that delivery of the work. and I wanted to make it clear in a minute of our board in public that we do fully support each other, and particularly our exec colleagues who are at the front line of our operation. Delivering health and social care in the present environment, post-COVID, with increasing demand, increasing complexity of demand, all of the financial constraints that every health and care system is dealing with. We've just heard about estates. My understanding. Fire alarm, I'm told, so I'll just pause until the noise has stopped. Because at least that's working. My understanding is that Lord Darcy will be talking about not only the pressures in terms of the infrastructure and the capital, but also the pressures on leadership. We're not afraid to answer questions, difficult questions. We're ambitious as an organisation. We do recognise that change is always difficult, and growth, we can't do everything that everyone wants at the time that they want it. We are open to criticism, of course we are. That cannot be personal. It has to be around the professional and the organisation. So I just wanted to make that statement that we, and you will receive a letter from us. So that's on file. So thank you. Thank you. Just seen Katie making something, some emoji on, caught my eye on screen. So thank you. Moving on, it's now Chief Exec's report and the Horizon Scan. And I would commend the Horizon Scan to people because it's a really, I don't think perhaps we've focused enough on how important it is, so that where we're going can only be based on where we've been. And I think perhaps we don't demonstrate the building blocks clearly enough. So perhaps if you can look at it that way for us, Teresa, as you present it, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. So, so yes, the Horizon Scan really gives a flavour of some of the operational progression of the care groups and the corporate departments supporting those. You will see there's a real flavour of substantive appointments. We've had a commitment since we started as Manx Care to really recruit substantively to as many posts as possible, to reduce our reliance on banking agency, and you can see that coming through with lots of key appointments. What you can also see through the Horizon Scan is where we have linked in terms of peer review, looking at opportunities to broaden our network and to get external assurance and assessment of the quality of services that Manx Care are delivering. So particularly things like the Cheshire and Mersey major trauma and critical care network peer review, which is scheduled for the 9th of October, which I've just signed off the self-assessment, which really demonstrates just how much we have moved in terms of a compliance piece and preparedness. And I think, you know, for a small island with a relatively small hospital, we are running a hospital which is close to achieving a lot of the parameters of a major trauma centre in terms of its level of resilience and response. We are seeing an emerging picture of very clear and cohesive strategies for the organisation, a refreshed communication strategy, an emerging commercial strategy. We've obviously got the people, culture and engagement strategy refresh here for the board to consider today. So it's that discipline and rigour around planning and response and having a clear vision for the future, whilst also demonstrating that our services that we deliver on a day-to-day basis are of the highest quality and are being assured appropriately. It's an important time of the year, the COVID vaccination programme and the autumn booster is about to commence, as is the delivery of the new RSV vaccine. The board is aware that we have had temporary locations for this, and this is no exception during autumn, in that we have moved out of the Chester Street premises and we'll be delivering the autumn booster from the private patients units in Nobles Hospital, while supporting that with a number of pop-ups at various locations across the island. Winter is a critical time for us. Given our financial position, we haven't set aside any dedicated funding for winter, but the executive will be focused on what additional schemes and initiatives we can put in place to ensure we manage through winter as effectively as we possibly can. There is an update on motorsport, and that is because the National Motorsport Group has asked organisations who respond and support those events during the course of the year to quantify what it actually costs. We know there is a huge benefit to the island, and Manx Care are very committed to the ongoing support of those events. But obviously it is a request that we have responded to in establishing what it does cost us to be able to support those events and bring additional staff on island. I'm really encouraged that following the investment of the business case into the CAM service, we have progressed rapidly under Tim's leadership with the procurement of certain parts of that pathway, so a very important single point of access, and some of the psychological therapies and those being delivered in the educational session. Picking up on estates, there is an update on Common Moor. This is taking longer than we would like. The board was very clear that we wanted to see that capital programme move at pace, given we know that building is not compliant. But I think we are slightly bound by others in terms of that design phase, the I2 stage of the design phase in the capital programme. But I thought it was pertinent, given the position the board had taken around Common Moor, that we bring an update to you on that. Summerhill View, under again Tim's leadership, is progressing really well with the new provider being appointed and the implementation for them to mobilise that service. As I say, I think there are a few very positive events coming up. We're working with the Mayor of Douglas on an event on the 19th of September to really look at loneliness as part of that sort of wider community response. We have progressed the work on the women's health strategy, and a steering group has been established, and I'm the exec sponsor in that. And again, some really positive work in that some of the work done in children's and families social care, working in conjunction with our partners and customers, has been shortlisted for an award. So the Bridges scheme, which looks at really supporting families and individuals on the edge of care, either before care or post care, has been shortlisted for an eminent national award. So, I mean, I continue to, with the support of the exec team, be proud around the quality of care we are delivering. Our latest friends and family results confirm that 90% of those that respond to friends and family have a good or excellent experience of our care. And I'd just like to close by thanking the exec team for their support over recent days and weeks, and also the support of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Wendy,
Yes.
may I just pick up a point? I did give Teresa a bit of heads up on this. I was just interested in your horizon scan, Teresa, about the women's and children's integrated, and that your pre-birth consultation is going online. I've had quite a few comments about that, and I disclose an interest because I'm a new grandparent. And certainly the parents of that child benefited hugely from the personal contact they had with the midwifery team prior to the birth of the child. And to put that online, you know, given that we're looking at 300 to 400 births a year, seemed like a retrograde step, because I've heard lots of commentary about how much young parents welcome that engagement with the team, that physical and practical engagement with the team, particularly if it's a first time.
Yeah. And Oliver may want to supplement what what I say. I think the intent behind it was to offer more choice and flexibility. So certainly, my understanding is that the face-to-face sessions, if they are required or requested, will still be made available. We have a small team, which meant that those face-to-face sessions were probably not always as accessible as what they could have been. Hence the approach to do some of the online courses in bite size, so people could dip into it as and when they felt able to, or pick up certain aspects of that programme. But you know, I'm very conscious, as ever, we always consider and respond to what the public are saying, and therefore it is important that we review the position in the light of the public response to that change, which does bring us in line with England, but that's not to say that we should slavishly follow that. Like I say, if we have feedback to the contrary, we will take that and then give consideration to how we would meet the needs of those parents or new to be parents and grandparents.
Indeed, thank you, Teresa.
Tim?
Just a question about vaccinations, which probably shows my ignorance more than anything else. Just in terms of whether vaccinations are available by GP surgeries, which in other places they are, and also via pharmacies as well, and also in terms of the Shigella vaccine, which is being rolled out in England, and I think I've read that we are rolling that out here as well. So just a general question, which I say is probably based on my ignorance about where one goes.
And I'll probably ask Oliver to respond to this as the executive lead for that programme.
Yeah. So it's a mixed kind of delivery. So we've Manx Care and the DHSC before that has always delivered the COVID vaccines ourselves. It's quite a complex vaccination programme to deliver compared to others such as flu. In terms of the logistics of it, which is why I know in conversations with the PCN we're going to retain delivering it. Also, we're going to deliver the RSV vaccine as well ourselves. The GPs deliver a wide range of vaccines, including the flu vaccine, seasonal flu, as well as what was the previous version of the shingles vaccine, and hopefully then the new vaccine, shingles vaccine, is going to be coming online in the next month or so. So it's a slightly mixed picture that we've got here.
Because sometimes the flu vaccines can be given at the same time as the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, and we do offer that. We do offer a co-administered opportunity if somebody comes for their COVID vaccine, that we do offer them flu as well, but the GPs still offer flu, as do pharmacies as well.
Because it would be inconvenient, to say the least, to have to go to one place and then to another place to have to get what you needed. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
I just want to say terrific report. Thank you.
Thank you. Really helpful to hear where we are at the moment. So thank you, Teresa. So we're now moving on to exceptional reports from the individual board committees. Nigel.
I'd like, if I may, because I was absent from the last FPC, I'd like to pass that over to Sandra, my colleague, who's kindly chaired that meeting.
I apologise, I didn't know that. I should have said that. Sandra, thank you, and thank you for stepping in, chairing.
No, you're very welcome indeed. Thank you, Nigel. It was quite a lively meeting. Always covered quite a lot of points. We spent, as Jeff has already covered, quite a lot of time spent on the estate strategy. That was quite a detailed conversation around that, particularly as we were all quite emotional about wanting to move that up quite far, especially with trying to release some of the capital back in so that we could upgrade, especially there's about 14 properties, I think, were unoccupied. So we've been talking about that quite a long time. And we were also talking about the financial performance of Manx Care and the pressures that we're under continuously, and how I haven't been on the board for very long, but we've all seen an incredible take up across all of the care groups on the responsibility for their finance, and that's been a really big education across the care groups. And so everybody has their budgets. People talk about finance all of the time. So everybody's aware of those. But notwithstanding that, we're still under enormous financial pressure to be able to deliver.
We'll come on to that in later on the agenda as well.
Has anybody got any other questions? That's what I can remember from the meeting. There were two large points that we covered during the meeting.
As I say, we'll come on to the financial position as this item on the agenda. So any comments from anyone? No, thank you. So CQC update. Sheila, thank you. You're taking on this for us.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to give an update on the CQC action plan, but there's some key things I wanted to relay to you. We've had a substantial amount of actions that have been in red, and they've been in red because they've missed their sub-ident, so to speak. What I've requested is to understand what was sitting in the red and has there been any progress. So the difference here today in this report is that I've reopened those red ones effectively, and as you can see from the table, that we've seen a significant change in things moving out of red into amber. But these are specifically the group that were always in red simply because they'd passed the date required. The second thing, I've met with the Department of Health and Social Care, and we're meeting again on, I think it's something like the 19th of September, and we're spending a whole afternoon looking at the whole plan and going into some significant detail as to what's been stalled, why it's been stalled, and hopefully, Chair, when we come back to the next board meeting, I'll be able to update with some progress on how we're going to go forward with some of the stalled actions. So I think I'll leave it there for now, Chair.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think a review of it is timely. I also think that we do need to meet the CQC standards. My understanding, I think the board's understanding is that where we have failed to, it's because we're not entirely in control of that element of care. And therefore we have to have a balance as to where our responsibility sits. It will never be binary, all or nothing. It will always be a shared responsibility. I think understanding that to the board and being able to assure us, because there's no doubt that we will welcome another CQC review as they rebuild themselves. There'll be some delay to that, but I think that is where we're heading. And I think you're absolutely right. The reviewing red actions rather than saying that's done, we can't do that. I think I'm really keen that we look as to what we can do, similar to the estate strategy. You know, we have agency in that space, and we need to make sure we use all of that before we start looking to colleagues across to say, it's your problem, not ours. Do you think that CQC should be, it's our minimum standard? So I'm very keen that we push that. So thank you. We look forward. We will spare time for a broader discussion when you're ready, Sheila. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add to that, Chair, I absolutely agree with you. The CQC reports that were undertaken, of course, were a point in time audit. Yes. And the changes that have gone on since then are quite remarkable. So there is something about I need to understand that, because I believe some of those actions, very detailed actions, may not be applicable now. I don't mean that we're not going to do things. What I mean is they need to be put in the right place in order to make sure that we're delivering. And as you said, Chair, more than the minimum expected quality, safety and effectiveness standards.
I think that's a really good point. You know, this is my 7th month here. The pace of change, even in that time, I'm talking to colleagues who've been here for longer. Nigel, particularly, I think we're good at change. Are we good at embedding change? I think is the question. And once it's embedded, what difference does that make to patients and the public? I think that's the sort of, I'd like to see that pull through. And CQC is a tool to help us understand that. So thank you.
Yes, I was just going to really welcome Sandra's fresh pair of eyes looking at the plan the recommendations, and also in having gained some traction with conversations with partners around the plan, because it's the actions are not just for Manx Care, they are for a range of partners. So I just really welcome that, and also welcome the review in terms of recommendations being, as you say, made in a point of in time, and things have moved on since then. So those recommendations may well not be appropriate anymore. Not that we haven't done them, but the service or the area has changed so significantly that we need to close those on. So just thank you very much. And I know that Sandra will be bringing regular updates to BQSE.
I was just going to say the route is through the quality committee, so thank you. That's really helpful. So Tim, sorry, I'm sorry, Jackie.
If I might, just picking up on the point about our reliance on other partners. As an owner of a number of those who would be sitting in the red, I think we need to think as a board about how we actually start to formally escalate some of these things up. And I think previously, when we've come to things where we rely on others, our response has been inconsistent. Sometimes it's been a little bit of, well, that belongs to them and we'll wait for them to do it. Sometimes it's been much more involved and direct, but I think a lot of those actions have reached a point where it needs higher level escalation, organisation to organisation rather than officer to officer, to say, and again it comes back to, we almost need a cohesive package that says this is what we require or we need of this department, this is the help we need from that department across, so we can see that whole system piece.
So I'd rather not use the language escalate, because I think that implies a sort of combative approach. You know, we're in partnership to improve health and care. So I think we have absolutely the right system through the board-to-board meetings that we have, that we should be submitting papers that describe where we've got to and where we need allies to work with us in order to meet the CQC's requirements. So I think we need to use the board-to-board meetings effectively. They are an assurance meeting, but there is also an opportunity for discussion. Assurance is a two-sided process, it's not just one. So I'm very keen that perhaps once we've thought through this, we could have an element to that meeting that is CQC Ofsted regulatory requirements. That will fit in with the wider professional regulatory requirements our staff have to meet. And I wonder whether that might be a helpful way of saying, this is where, you know, we're eyeballing you across the table, but we are in a position where we can discuss this and come forward with a solution rather than here's a paper that we're sending into the ether. So I don't think that ever really works. So Tuesday I will take that back to the department. But I think if we can structure that meeting where it's a decision-making meeting that both parties bring issues to, but also we have potential solutions to explore them.
If I may, some of those actions, so we have the relationship with the DHSC, and it's absolutely important that they understand and have visibility of that. But some of these actions involve our direct relationships with other parties that the DHSC is not in the middle of.
Well, I think they have to be, because our statutory responses that we report through the department to our minister. So that is the first place that discussion has to take place. Beyond that, we obviously have relations across all sorts of bits of the system. But I'm very keen that in terms of governance, it's a very clear route, that there are no surprises for our Department of Health, and indeed we use our colleagues there effectively to leverage some of their relations with other people, so that we're not on our own in that space. So in terms of governance, I think we really have to use the board-to-board as effectively as possible. And we'll take that outside and talk to them, obviously, and then see. But unless there's another forum for that, Manx Care's statutory responsibilities are to gain assurance for the Minister and the Department of Health acts on his behalf.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's absolutely important that the DHSC understands any of the blockages that we're coming across. And I think that is the place for um, the civil servants within the DHSC to talk to their colleagues in other departments to try and block that, and then, if necessary, for the political members, ministers, to talk to each other. And I think we're at the very starting level, where Sheila is having those initial conversations just to make sure that they really are blockages,
Yes.
and they aren't things that and they aren't things that can't be solved at a more, not that Sheila's a junior member of staff, but can't be solved at that lower level before having to go to ministers, etc. But I think it is really good in terms of just our general business, that ministers and for our board to board, are informed the whole time about the kind of issues that we are dealing with other parts of government.
Absolutely. I don't dispute the importance of relationships across everyone, but I think in terms of the decision making and the arbitration, if you like, it's got to be through the statutory responsibility route. Oh, sorry, Sandra.
It's okay. Just you took the word out of my mouth, Chair, and I was going to use the word blockages as well. In support of your comments, got so far, if there's a different coding we can put on our reports where it's a shared responsibility, but the word blockage is not, maybe we can come up with a better word, but if it's got so far and it can't go any further until the lid is lifted somewhere else, I think that might help the reports, because the reports are fantastic. The reports have developed, what's like years back, we were in visitors, even that extra to show the responsibility of work, which was a bit sort of outside of our hands.
And we've adopted that approach in terms of the response to the internal audit on financial controls. It's very, very clear where we have full authority, control and accountability to deliver, and where we rely on others to affect that delivery. That's really important distinction.
Thank you. Tim, Ofsted update.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly. So the report's completed and due QSE and then back up to the board. Some highlights, Chair, some similarities with the conversation we just had, and I will be spending a lot of time with Sheila aligning the TQC and Ofsted sets of issues around the external work we just talked about, and I fully support the approach that you described there. Chair of the Children's Service Improvement Board is about to move on. I think the contract finishes at the end of September or early October, is my understanding. It's an opportunity for us to have a conversation with the department, which I think we'll be having around continued oversight moving forward, and that conversation is booked in. Some emerging discussions around a children's partnership model, which I certainly would support. I spoke to Teresa. I think we are excited and about that opportunity to bring in partners to support outcomes for children more widely, rather than looking at Manx Care alone. It's one of the benefits for us, I think. I'm very supportive of continued oversight. I think I'm also keen to have that leverage to bring oversight into our own services as well as for wider partners. We continue to make progress. The Chair is writing a concluding report, and there'll be further recommendations in that report. They are a balance, as I've said before, around some of the external priorities that exist within beyond Manx Care, which we're negotiating and working hard on, and they're tougher to shift. The internal priorities, which focus really now around the pivot towards early intervention. So there's a connectivity there with other things we want to do, both as a care group and across Manx Care. So excited by that. And then the final thing you'd expect me to say is there continue to be some challenges, particularly around capacity. We're moving capacity around internally within Children's at the moment, which is kind of working okay. But it's not a long-term position we want to be in. And I think that's something that we'll take forward over the coming months to support the Assistant Director to drive further sustainability and stability in Children's, which we've, I think, made decent progress on over the last few months.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any comments on the
And just in support of that wider piece as well, and obviously, we've had the MASH, haven't we, up and running for the best part of it's over a year
It's
now,
over a year.
actually, and we've had the evaluation report, and again, it's something which I think has been very strongly evidenced in terms of the positive impact the multi-agency safeguarding hub has had. And I think one of the things that we want to do is to be able to protect that capacity and to be able to ensure that the MASH does continue to do what it needs to do, but also has the opportunity to develop into a broader MASH, which was always the ambition and vision in terms of its response to adults too. So that's another important piece of work Executive will be working on to be able to sustain that arrangement moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, very helpful. So performance, we asked, rather than receiving reams of very interesting performance data, we asked as a board to look in detail at various elements of care. And we'll use the committee escalation process to look at areas of concern. So we have a belt and braces approach, and today I think, Oliver, you're taking us through the tertiary services. So thank you.
Okay. Are people happy to go through it just on the agenda, or shall I share it on screen? Or
I think we've all got
okay.
the pack, so I think if you can talk to it,
yeah,
so
sure.
the public can hear. Thank you.
So the first point is probably the most blindingly obvious thing that I've ever said to the board, but Nobles Hospital is a small district general hospital serving the population of the Isle of Man. So I don't think any of us would agree with that, disagree with that. But like most DGHs, Nobles relies on specialist services, teaching hospitals and specialist hospitals in the UK to deliver specialist and secondary treatments. The reliance on tertiary partners has increased over the years as the NHS has reorganised to form specialist units serving a higher volume of patients for specific conditions, and aims to improve patient outcomes and efficiency, particularly for rare conditions, cancer and major trauma, but there's a number of other examples. Reliance on tertiary services is more complex for the Isle of Man given our location. So allied to our tertiary offer, we have both the patient transfer service, which takes patients across to the UK on scheduled flights, as well as an air bridge, which is predominantly our fixed wing air ambulance transfer service, but also is supplemented by GNAS, the HEM service, and also the Coast Guard. As Manx Care sits outside the NHS, our contracting relationships and our ability to share data seamlessly is more complex, and our commissioning levers are still in the early stages of development. However, the UK and Isle of Man Reciprocal Health Agreement does mean that we are our ability to access NHS services in a pre-authorised treatment way is secure. So that basically means that our reliance on the provision of service by the NHS will never be removed. So our tertiary partners, we have 11 main tertiary partners, which are all listed there. So in terms of CQC ratings, 2 of those trusts are outstanding, which is Liverpool Heart and Chest, the London Centre for Neurosciences, 8 of which are good, and 1 of which requires improvement. The requires improvement trust is Liverpool University Hospitals NHS Trust, which is a relatively recent merged trust from the former Royal Liverpool Hospital and Aintree Hospital. I've just given an example of just some data there, which I won't go through in detail, but it gives a breakdown of Q1 data in terms of what we pay for each trust of the top 11. Our variance, which is currently showing a 662 adverse, and then a breakdown in terms of all the spend that's been made, expenditure that's been made in the first quarter, what that breakdown is. So it's around 37% elective. So when I say elective, I mean anything planned. So any appointments, planned surgeries, planned treatments come under the elective banner. 21% is non-elective, so that's where a patient has gone across in an unplanned way, normally through the air ambulance service or GNAS for some kind of non-elective treatment includes critical care, 15% for drugs, and the remainder is split between diagnostics, excess bed days and other, which is basically the balance really. The key drivers of variance in Q1, I won't go through those in detail, but as you can see, the vast majority of those are very kind of demand driven, so they are things that were not necessarily planned, or if they were planned were in an urgent nature. So just over 450,000 in adult ICU bed days between Luft, Aintree Hospital and the Walton Centre. Cardiac surgery there, and with overspending or over plan on a number of drugs. The cystic fibrosis drugs in point was because we've harmonised with the new NICE guidelines around the gene therapy drugs that have recently been approved for children. Cardiac devices is a planned surgery, but mostly urgent in nature. Vascular grafts, so those are specially designed grafts that are used to replace aorta, so they are specially designed based on the person's anatomy, and so consequently are very expensive. And finally, we had 2 bone marrow transplants in Clatterbridge, which is unusual to have 2 in 1 month. Whilst that expenditure is, as I say, very much demand-led, so is difficult to predict. We are predicting increases or month-on-month or year-on-year increases, particularly in oncology drugs, as the more traditional oncology drugs, chemotherapy, etc., are replaced with newer immunotherapy drugs. Whilst those are more clinically effective, they are more expensive and often cause side effects, which also require high-cost drugs, biologics, and things like that to treat the side effects. So, and as more of those immunotherapeutic drugs replace the more traditional chemotherapy, and that we'll see increases in that. And then similarly, with the cohort of cystic fibrosis drugs that are coming online, that spend on cystic fibrosis for children and at some point for adults will continue to increase. It's worth saying that some of these high cost drugs are, they are both people moving to the island, families moving to the island, as well as people who've been born on the island and grow up and develop long-term conditions. I'll just outline a bit around our contract management. As I mentioned earlier, we're still, despite Manx Care inheriting a budget of over 20 million for tertiary for the DHSC, the actual management of the contracts was minimal. So we've recently invested, particularly within Jackie's team, in increasing the amount of resource that is dedicated just to contract management. So our tertiary contracts stipulate that we should hold a minimum of quarterly contract management meetings, but in practice, within the 5 main providers, which are Luft, Liverpool, Heart and Chest, Alder Hey, Clatterbridge and Walton, we hold monthly meetings and ad hoc as required. During those meetings, we discuss activity queries and challenges, reviewing the performance against the activity plan, any developments that either party should be aware of, so service reconfigurations, etc. So, recently that Liverpool has undergone quite a large shift in services shared particularly between Luft and Clatterbridge, as the Clatterbridge Hospital moved on to the city centre site. Discussions around service developments and also work in progress reports. So any patients who are a long-term stay where we wouldn't see almost the invoice arriving until they've been discharged, those patients that their care is spanning a number of months are discussed, and we've in the last week just agreed between the performance team, the tertiary contracting team, and air ambulance, a much more robust way of tracking those patients from transfer from here to discharge. So that process will get more robust in the next month, because we have seen some big swings in tertiary this so far this year, when big invoices have arrived for patients who have been on ITU for a prolonged period of time. From an internal point of view, as part of us setting up performance meetings with each of the care groups, and we've also set up a tertiary performance meeting, which is chaired by myself, but also attended by Jackie. We at that meeting we have an overview of performance across all of our providers. We look at any discrepancies or any queries, and that meeting has already, and the processes that underpin that meeting has already identified around 300k of discrepancies, which we are querying with providers. Also, for the first time, we've managed to get all of the elective waiting lists from our providers. So all of those Manx patients that are on waiting lists across all of our main providers, we've finally got after some difficulty, and we're just in the process of validating those through our own validation team and finding some quite interesting things that which hopefully should mean that we can start to pull patients off that waiting list who may not need to be on there. Also, something that we've been working on for the last year or so is establishing formal strategic partnerships between a number of trusts. All of those strategic partnership agreements have come to the board, and most of you remember those coming, and we have those with our 5 tertiary partners, and just in the process of establishing one with the Liverpool Women's. So those are attended by Manx Care and their providers exec team, as well as the clinical leaders from within that specialty. So Liverpool Heart and Chest has myself, Jackie Marina, and the management team from the Medicine Care Group. It's primarily focused on discussing kind of collaborations to improve service delivery, and also discussing any contractual issues that aren't able to be resolved at a kind of service level. And the areas of success that we've seen so far is re-establishment of the Alder Hay Paediatric Neurology Service on Ireland, which had kind of petered out during COVID, due to the fact that the majority of their paediatric neurologists had retired or left the service. But we're now in a position where we are seeing a local actual visiting service once a month, with the following month being virtual from one of the paediatric neurologists. We've developed and established, it's been in place for over a year now, but a primary PCI pathway. So previously all ST elevation MIs received thrombolysis and stayed within our CCU until there was a bed available for them, which is out with the pathway that's been available in the UK for about 10 years. But with the combined the efforts of Liverpool Heart and Chest, our air ambulance service, and the team here, and the ambulance service, the road ambulance service, have established this pathway whereby if a STEMI is identified in the patient's home, the ambulance will go straight to the airport, and they will meet the air ambulance team in the hangar, and the patient will be flown off. And largely we are meeting the call to balloon time. So we are around the same performance as the UK for kind of outer city performances. We're in the process of securing access to the Walton Centre stroke thrombectomy service, which similarly to primary PCI means that you will need a rapid transfer once a stroke has been diagnosed downstairs in ED, a rapid transfer across to the Walton Centre so that the clot can be removed mechanically through the neuroradiology laboratory, rather than relying on thrombolysis, which we have done for many years, which we'll see those patients who are indicated to have thrombectomy to see their rehab time much reduced, has been seen in the UK. They're collaborating with the Liverpool Royal Gastro team to establish the ERCP service. ERCP is one of my favourite names of procedures. It's endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatogram, which is a procedure that looks at problems with the gallbladder. And our issue here is that whilst we rely on Liverpool quite a bit for our ERCP, we can't actually maintain a service because we don't have the numbers here. So the idea is that Dr. Neville, our new gastroenterologist, will spend some time in Liverpool every year doing the relevant number of procedures so we can do the procedure here on Ireland. And then finally, a kind of umbrella project across all of our strategic partnerships is developing virtual clinic pathways. So wherever possible, we can avoid patients having to travel off Ireland to just be seen within a clinic for a follow-up, which might just be a 5-minute, how are you doing? Everything okay? Yeah, okay, there you go. So, you know, given that costs us around 250 quid for the flight plus around £100 for the actual appointment, you know, that can be delivered and much more cost effectively. And then my final slide just before the conclusion just is around our central off Ireland's referral team. So that really the only involvement that we've got in terms of systems is our patient transfer service, which essentially is a travel agent for getting patients off Ireland. So if somebody gets an appointment letter, send it over to the patient transfer office and they get their flight booked. There's also the opportunity if somebody wants an escort, then we have a nurse who is employed there part-time to do the escort assessments, and around 40% of our patients that are travelling across get an escort based on our criteria. Clearly, you know, with the 20 to 25 million pounds worth of expenditure going to tertiary, we want more control over that. Because at the moment it is a apart from the contract management piece which we do, which is retrospective, there is very little proactive control we have around tertiary, and the Central Off Ireland's referral team is designed to do that. So it will be a central hub for all referrals going off Ireland, ensuring only those patients who can't be treated on Ireland will be referred. It will ensure referrals that do go to the UK will be made to the correct trust, because we do have the occasional referral going off to somewhere random for no reason. So that will make sure that all of our referrals, within reason, but the vast majority will go to one of our 11 contracted partners. It will assure those patients who are referred off Ireland are case managed and repatriated wherever possible, and anything that is booked that can be done on Ireland. So it's like, say, a scan or a blood test that can be done here as part of that off-Ireland treatment is done here. So you don't have to go across to have a CT scan when it can be done here and the image transferred. We're also going to make sure that there'll be a clinical assessment for the funded escort as well. And also, most importantly, is provision of accurately, timely and comprehensive data that will allow us to much more accurately model our what's happening in tertiary. Because at the moment, all of the data that we get is all retrospective, and it all tends to be given to us by the NHS Trust around 3 months after, which isn't good when we're trying to match up all of the activity and consolidate and all of that data together. We've also procured a bespoke IT system, which has been procured from Jersey. It's been developed for the Jersey off Ireland transfers team, and we're just adapting it to our purposes. We're in the process of recruiting a permanent office manager and a clinical coordinator, and we aim for the off Ireland referrals team to be fully embedded by April 2025. But in order to help the Back to Balance plan, we have seconded the clinical case manager, and she started already to start proactively managing some of those. So whenever a request goes into the patient transfers team, that will go to the clinical case coordinator, and she will see whether that whatever it is, whether it's a scan, a blood test, can be done here, and if it is a follow-up appointment, whether that can be done virtually rather than transferred across. Then just in terms of my last slide, which is next steps. So we want to continue to mature the contractual relationships between Manx Care and our providers, and cultivate the strong strategic partnerships with our biggest NHS partners, and also establish a link with the Cheshire and Mersey Integrated Care Board. Want to increase care group ownership of tertiary referrals and waiting lists and workloads, so there's the same focus on internal waiting lists as there is to external waiting lists. And we one of the aims or objectives is, once we have the Off Island service tracking service working, that we'll look to divide the current centrally held tertiary budget and devolve those into care groups, so that they have more of a impetus to manage that tertiary budget, because it will directly affect their individual financial performance. And then finally, just support the development of the Off-Island referrals team to ensure cost and clinical effectiveness when accessing Off-Island care.
Thank you, Oliver. Really comprehensive overview. Any questions, queries? Go ahead, Sheila.
Just to say, Chair, this is really, really important work, isn't it? This is our clinical strategy. This really demonstrates for the residents of the Isle of Man. Fabulous service. This is that we can get to a specialist unit across the water really quickly, and living across the water on the Wirral, it's sometimes quicker from the Isle of Man to land in Walton Neuro or Alder Hay than it is to cross Liverpool at times. So thank you for that presentation, and I think it really does demonstrate what we want to do in the future around being really clear what our clinical strategy is going forward, and this demonstrates the really important pathways of care that are required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think it really, for me, it demonstrates how Manx Care has got a grip on a service that apparently wasn't such a grip on previously. So just to really congratulate you and your team on that, and really, really important, not just from the financial side, but also to make sure that people are getting timely interventions in the right place and closer to home, as possible. So really, really good. Just thinking about the over-planned work, I guess in the future you'll be able to profile that far more effectively and smooth out that. But also just wanting to maybe my understanding is that things are becoming more expensive as well. And that's really important for this board and for others to know, that with new drugs, new therapies, gene therapy, things cost more, and even things which have been there for some time that cost more than they did. So that's really important to understand. Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, I just want to echo the previous comments really, and also say that just reflect on how far we've come in 3 years. 3 years ago, I remember sitting around this table and we didn't really know what was coming our way from tertiary, and now there's very clear demonstrable evidence and assurance that actually we're beginning to get a handle on this, and the emergence of a strategy, as Sheila was saying, which I entirely laud and will congratulate you on. And I think it's just important in times of stress and strain, which we know we're under, it's important to pause and smell the roses. And I think this is a real example of just pausing for a moment, not too long, but just pausing for a moment to smell the roses. So well done and thank you. And the fact that we can get access to centres of true world excellence very quickly is fantastic. I think, backed by fantastic on-island diagnostic radiological techniques as well to serve those sort of points. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I would just echo that. I guess sat behind all of this presentation, there is a level of performance and data which should not be underestimated, how comprehensive that data set now is, which I can categorically say never existed before Manx Care. So encouraging that we now have the data in order to inform our clinical strategy and our developments. And, I think picking up on Tim's point, these are life-saving interventions for the Isle of Man residents. And they do come at an increased cost. And I think what is really important that we attempt to demonstrate as a board is the improving clinical outcomes for these patients. Because again, we didn't have a clear baseline around morbidity, mortality, and Marina has worked really hard and her predecessor to put some of that in place. But I think it is really, really important we capture and articulate the very positive clinical outcomes we are now achieving for the population. And as we move on to things like thrombectomy, the impact that is going to have, ensuring our patients here are able to access an equitable standard of care to those in the UK is incredibly important. It's what we set out to do 3.5 years ago. And I think this tells us that we have made a huge amount of progress in that space. We will continue to make progress as we bring on new services, new clinicians, and develop those really strong strategic partnerships. But inevitably, some of that life-saving treatment comes at a higher cost, and we'll have to just try and track that carefully, because we would absolutely never will not want to do any of this.
Absolutely. I think the thrombectomy challenge is going to be interesting, because there's going to be many more cases, because the increase in numbers accessing thrombectomy in England is quite significant. So that's going to add to our cost pressures.
Yeah.
But it does improve massively quality of life post-stroke. So there's all sorts of benefits that, and I think it benefits realisation of some of those clinical areas might be helpful in terms of explaining our costs to people as well. The thing that stood out for me that I think we haven't discussed is the opportunity for an individual consultant to maintain and develop their skills in a partner organisation and bring those skills back. And I'm really keen that that is one of the development opportunities we offer, both for the service but also across Manx Care, be it in a social care worker or being a medic, a nurse. I think that being able to maintain your skills by getting a certain number of cases or whatever it might be, but bringing that learning back, and that increases teamwork, increases positive outcomes for patients. So I thought that was really interesting, and it'd be really nice to perhaps hear from that individual at some stages of one of our board stories to sort of understand the learning from that. Yes, okay, so thank you very much. Sorry, Charlie, put your hand up. Sorry, I can't.
It's okay, thank you.
The hands on the screen, I can't see it.
It's okay. I'm really pleased to see a focus on what is essentially our off-island healthcare infrastructure. It's absolutely essential for us to draw on. And I'm really pleased to see in some of the developments around, so the team is great, and developing virtual clinic pathways, because the patients that we send off island for these types of interventions are going to require follow-up, and some of them on a long-term basis. And I just wonder how we can use virtual clinics and virtual offerings to the advantage of both the patient and their experience in reducing the amount of travel that they may need to undertake and disruption to the family for their follow-up. And then furthermore, that technology to drive down our costs associated with the follow-up of those patients, but also to make sure that those patients are then discharged as soon as possible back into the care of their GP on island. So it's just to acknowledge about there's the initial the acuity phase of that treatment, getting people off island safely, treated and brought back, but a longer piece of work around that follow-up piece and how long that takes, and how the off-island infrastructure then feeds into the on-island infrastructure, and to encourage the use of technology, like I said, to make sure the patient has the best possible experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really well-made point, Charlie. There's sort of transitions between various elements of an organisation in terms of care for the patient are hugely important. How do you move from primary to secondary to tertiary care and back again? And perhaps given the work that we heard in July around that you're focusing on DNAs and where are, you know, both risk to individuals but also service opportunities in understanding that, I think that all fits in that process. Some of the work that I've been hearing about in England around patient-initiated follow-up, where follow-up is in the hands of the patient, really interesting in terms of both outcomes and investment required. So I think there's an area that perhaps we, again, it's another one of those performance areas that we might want to look in more detail at in the future. So thank you, Oliver, that was incredibly helpful. I'd like to perhaps suggest that as a board we hear at some stage from Kate Tier, who runs the air ambulance service, because she's got the sort of corresponding data and some international comparators with costs for that. So perhaps we'll ask her to come to a board and give her presentation. She's done it for me, and it was really interesting, particularly in terms of outcomes. And as a comment made about crossing Liverpool, some of the times that we achieve here from presenting with chest pain through to having your vessels called somewhere in Liverpool is extraordinary. And I think, again, puts in perspective some of the challenges we have financially as well. Okay, thank you very much. And again, Oliver, thank your team for that, because I know the data that sits behind this is huge. So now we move on to the outline business case for the Manx Care Record. Just for noting, the board had a deep dive into this. And to minute, thanks to the Digital Committee and Katie's chair of that for the enormous amount of work that's gone on prior to coming to the board at this stage. And just perhaps you can explain that this is our gift, but our opinion is going to shape how this develops in future.
Thanks, Chair. So as you've mentioned, the Manx Care Record is something we have discussed many times before, and I know is vitally important to us. It is being driven as a transformation project, so we don't own the process, but we are the key stakeholder in the process. So where we're at this point in time is we have created what's called an outline business case. So that is basically the opening case that goes to Treasury that says, here's broadly the direction of travel that we want to take, having considered our options, and here's broadly what we think it's going to cost. They have funded quite significant resource in order to create a really robust business case that has involved all parties, all throughout Manx Care, the DHSC, some specialist providers as well to support the production of the case. That was presented to the board a couple of weeks ago. It presented 4 options, one of which was to carry on as we were and simply replace our individual systems like for like as we carry on. One was to carry on as we are, and as things went out of service, so to speak, was to upgrade individually at that point. Neither of those 2 options give us the integration and the functionality and the benefits and the outcomes that we need from this project. And actually, both of those 2 options are extraordinarily expensive. It's important to note that if even the do nothing option means we will be spending money as we go forward, it will cost us more than it currently costs us to keep the current ailing, inappropriate system going. And then the other 2 options were about moving forward and procuring a solution. So one option was to procure as part of a wider procurement opportunity, and the other was to procure a single solution independently. We had initially thought that procurement being part of a wider procurement was our preferred direction of travel given our size. However, things have moved on since then, and what we're finding is that the direction of travel around procurement in the UK that we perhaps wanted to feed into, was not going the same way we were in terms of the level of integration. It was not including integrations with primary care. And also some of the timescales involved meant it could take quite a bit longer. So for that reason, we recommended to the board that we go down the route of self-procuring to our agreed specification a single patient care record. And the interesting thing about that is that that option also is more cost effective than the do nothing option. So we will still have to invest and we will still have to spend more money, but actually it will cost us less over the 10-year period to invest in the solution that gives us all of the outcomes that we wish to achieve, rather than doing nothing, which will give us none of the outcomes that we want to achieve.
Thank you. I think the point that really hit home for me was the standing still is really not an option. It's financially unbelievably expensive in the multi-millions, and it isn't going to improve or give us anything that we need to be a more coherent, data-driven organisation. So that really impressed me. I think it's clear that we need to offer our expert opinion and our support to our colleagues in the department as they take this through. But we are standing a little bit on a burning platform now in terms of timescales. So I would like to propose that we write formally to the department with our board's decision. Obviously, I know you have shared all the data behind it, but I think it'd be incredibly helpful if we had a letter from the board saying that we fully support option 3, and these are the reasons, and if we wish to engage at speed with the process of this, because all of these things take many of us have been through this in England, and it takes a surprisingly long while and a degree of initiative that perhaps we need to push for. So is the board in support of that?
Yeah, agree.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, Katie, thank you. And please thank your committee, because I know this is a very, very long piece of work that you've done. It's very detailed. People, culture and engagement strategy. Miriam, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So since Manx Care's inception, one of the key priorities has been to improve the culture of the organisation, and that's a very kind of ethereal statement, isn't it? What does that actually mean? What are we talking about when we talk about culture? Last year, people, culture and engagement strategy, the first one for Manx Care across the piece, was approved by the board in September. We have now done an extraordinary amount of work against that strategy, and that is kind of documented within this document. But what we wanted to do was update, refresh, and review, I suppose, where we were with that strategy and to see what else we needed to do. So if I could ask colleagues to turn to the front page of the new strategy. The first thing I would say is a big thank you to communications colleagues for typesetting and putting those photographs in, but we have already fed back that we would like to see that being a more inclusive kind of set of pictures to include colleagues across the organisation, including social care colleagues and people from different backgrounds, etc. So we are already on with that. The strategy has been to the People Committee, and there was much discussion around how we could make sure that it was hard-hitting enough and gave a really clear view to our staff and our workforce across the piece of what we intend to do and what we have done. And further work's been done on it since then. The strategy is based on 5 strategic people pillars, which are documented there on the cover sheet. And I won't need to go through them because I'm assuming that the document is as read. And those pillars are enablers to our workforce ambitions. Now, those workforce ambitions have been updated, but follow the same theme as the previous workforce ambitions. So we're just kind of building on that progress. Those ambitions will be properly supported by an organisational development plan, which has already been drafted and been through the People Committee, but does require more work. What that plan has shown us is that when we articulate all of the people work streams across the whole of Manx Care as a separate organisation, we are currently working on over 120 people work streams with very little resource internally within the organisation. And those work streams are going very, very well. So I think that's testament really to the work across the organisation of all of the leaders, that we are actually managing to progress those work streams. And what we actually need is more oversight and clarity about where they sit and where they report. The strapline for the strategy as a whole is on valuing and developing our people and improving our culture. And I think that for me is the key, to make sure that our people are properly developed, properly included, understand the value to them, and that we pull together a culture under one employer brand. If I could ask colleagues to please turn to page 8 in the strategy. What that does is it tells us what we've achieved so far against our workforce strategy. So there what we've got is all of those things against the previous ambitions that have been the work that has been done across the organisation over the last year. Page 9 articulates the pillars, and it articulates that in a way that we were very keen to do, which was to shift the focus to say our people should be at the centre of what we do. Not our policies, not our processes, but our people. And those things should be underpinned by good governance and stakeholder engagement and policy and legislation and all of those things. Actually, our people should be at the centre of what we have. On page 7, what we have there, sorry to go backwards, I missed my own notes. What we have there is a list of our care values, but also that document on page 7 actually brings that to life in terms of what behaviours do we actually expect. This forms the basis of our behaviour charter for our people across the organisation. And then from page 11 onwards, what we have is each of the ambitions with an underpinning work plan for year 1, year 2 and year 3, and what the measures of success for those will be. Some of those actions are building on actions from the previous strategy, but many of them are new from the work that we've undertaken over the last 12 months. And then finally on page 23, what we have there are the links to existing strategies that we already have in place. For example, the recruitment retention strategy, which is already operationally in place and has been previously approved by the board and is currently being implemented. The organisational development strategy, leadership development, EDI and staff engagement, and learning and development strategy. Now, all of those documents are currently in train and in development, and we are planning to bring them to the board over October and November. Talent management and succession planning strategy and health and wellbeing strategy will be coming after that. How are we going to measure our success? So on page 20, for me, it's not just about measuring the tasks that we do. I could do a list of tasks all of the time and bring them back to the board and say, look, I've done this task. But actually, what difference is that making? It's the kind of so what. How do we measure the impact? So as you can see there on page 20, we've included a graphic which documents for me in quite a clear and simple way how we're going to track our achievements and ensure we're getting good results by using our staff data, by making sure that the champions that we establish across the organisation, many of which are already in place, that we listen and we continually refresh in terms of the feedback that we get. But actually, the numbers back this up. Are we retaining staff? That's our single biggest risk in terms of the board assurance framework. Are we attracting the right staff? Are we retaining them? And we look at the numbers underneath. That's been a challenge as we've seen across all areas in terms of making sure that we've got accurate data. I feel much more assured that we're on the way to getting that accurate data, but there is still some more work to be done on that. Developing our people and making sure that we do have clarity in terms of career development frameworks, leadership development. Leadership development is a very clear gap in this organisation. and allowing our leaders to have the skills available to them. Supporting well-being and making sure that our staff are healthy and happy, because actually you get that right, they will deliver on your behalf. And finally, how does that impact on our performance and delivery? What does that mean in terms of the bottom line and in terms of the impact on patient care? And one of the things that I've said repeatedly to teams that I've worked with over my entire career is, if you cannot see a direct line of sight of the work that you are doing corporately to the impact and outcomes for the public, then you should not be doing it. And that is something that we always need to relay back. I'll leave it there, Chair, but that's our strategy as we've developed it so far.
Thank you. I'll take some questions on the top.
Thank you. So looking at the how you're supporting staff, and you mentioned mental health practitioners, there is one reference to working with occupational health to understand what those services are available. Is there anything about supporting staff? Is that overlapping with occupational health, or is it complementary to it, or how does that interact?
It's complementary. So we already have a staff welfare scheme as part of our shared service that does work with occupational health, but it's a confidential service that we can refer people to. The occupational health service is clearly a very specific and professional part of the shared service, which gives very clear advice on people's health in relation to their work. That's their role. And I think occupational health can quite often be misinterpreted as providing other types of welfare and support, which it is not there to do. But what we're also looking to do is the workforce and culture team internally is going to look at those sort of wider health and wellbeing strategies. So how do we get people to engage and value each other? How do we ensure that people support one another? Behaviours is a key part of that. How do we make sure we link people together? So staff networks is another part of that. All of those things are kind of connected back to healthy, happy staff. Does that help? Thank you.
So I was really pleased to see that your measures of success are aiming to be linked to outcomes, because I think that's really important for the board. But I know this has been a work in progress, so well done for landing it. Where does it go now after the board's seen it?
Well, if the board approves it, then we will be publishing it. And this is its last step.
And where it's been through the people committee.
It has.
So I know that's what the detail of what's been done. So I think it tells. Sorry, Nigel.
I really love the document, Miriam. I think it's great. It's a great statement. Great. I'm interested. You know, it's no secret that we're in a time of stress at the moment. You know, we've got financial pressures. We've got people very worried about the future. We've got people worried about access. Where do you think the temperature is right now? It's a very subjective question, but where do you think the temperature of our groups of people are right now?
I think one of the key gaps that's missing in terms of the temperature is that sense of being in one organisation. And there are a number of strands to that, but being part of one team, being led by this board. And there are a number of reasons why that is, and it's not the fault of anyone. It's exactly where I'd expect us to be in our journey in terms of organisational development. But I think once we get that sense of inclusion and belonging for our workforce across the organisation, that we are all one organisation and we are led by this board, I think that will improve things dramatically. I think there is a sense that Manx care staff are continually battered, I have to say, by public perception and by that constant squeeze. And I think the squeeze that we have on pay progression is a real challenge for people. That said, I think there is an understanding from the workforce and the kind of data that I look at and the engagement that I have with people across the organisation is very much that there is a building sense of we're on the cusp of something. And if we can hold our nerve and work together as a team and all pull together, that we will see some really positive outcomes and impact.
Marina, last comment, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm particularly interested in workplace trauma. And I wonder what we have in place to support staff who experience PTSD as a consequence of the trauma that they experience within the workplace. I know we've had several surveys and we have themes of that coming through. The difficulty we have from a psychological point of view is because we're an island and it's small and we all know each other, what do we have to provide for our staff so that they can actually get the trauma work that they need? Just putting it out there, because I don't think that staff welfare is enough. A lot of people are resistant to go to mental health services because they worry about confidentiality because it's such a small environment. I certainly know for the doctors, when I first became the RO 6 years ago, I established a SLA with Practitioner Health Program, which provides safe, confidential service for doctors, and they can access psychological work. They got an incredible CBT program for burnouts that really has been exceptional. And since COVID, they have actually gone further, and the service has stopped being for doctors only and has been extended out to other clinicians. And I'm just putting it out there that we think bigger than just staff welfare and the lack of support that we have for our staff, because it is our staff who matter.
So thank you. I think that's a really well-made point. There is a level of support that is missing from a general strategy document. I think perhaps if we could take that to the people committee and have a specific look at that area of need, I think that's a really that's the sort of that's what these conversations stimulate, is what's missing. So thank you, Marina. That's really helpful. Perhaps we can get the people committee to look specific at that and bring that back. Any other comments? So thank you. So moving on to the finance update, please.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see from the July management accounts that the forecast position has improved by £1 million based on compared to last year's. So we're currently predicting a 16.8 million deficit to the end of the year. As you'd expect, in response to that, the Exec and the Board have initiated a number of measures to try and address that gap. We've discussed these in detail at FP&C, and we anticipate that we can address the gap by approximately 11 million, which leaves us a further gap, a remaining gap of about 6 million to get back to balance. We are now looking at further opportunities, and in terms of that, we are re-looking at initiatives in the CIP that we've potentially previously discounted, and we're also looking at other areas that we can go to that we had previously thought perhaps not appropriate given the severity of our position. I'm going to pause there because I'm sure there are plenty of questions.
Yes, thank you, and I think that's a really helpful brief summary. And there's no doubt that some of our, so my understanding is that some of our savings are in process over a number of years, and they will take a number of years for all of the right reasons of not only quality impact assessment, but also the people involved in them and the processes that need to change. So I think that this is our, this is our challenging year, but there are areas that we are not in control of, for example, pay negotiations, and they are influenced by all sorts of things, including the English position. We just heard a really eloquent exposition of how a single line of drugs can add hundreds of thousands to a monthly run rate. So I think with those exceptions, the detailed work that you're now engaged in for the gap of around 6 million, can we be assured that we're very close to the department in this in terms of how we work through this?
Yep, absolutely. We're in constant contact with the department in terms of what those options look like, and we're looking to move to some decisions very, very quickly so we can establish any actions that need to be taken.
So there's a two-stage process. There's the board agreement with exec proposals, which is, of course, as a unitary board, a really useful process. And then there is the discussion with the department then there's the next layer is the department's representation through our minister to Treasury.
Yeah, so I think all of the actions that we've initiated to date are entirely within the control and gift and remit of Manx Care to do. The options that we're now looking at are largely commissioning or further more high-level political decisions that will need to be made, and it wouldn't be appropriate for Manx Care to make independently.
And as people in this room have made the point, I think we've not had inflationary uplift. We have not had investment in efficiency and productivity approach, and we've done it ourselves. And demand, complexity of demand is growing. So that's the context in which we're working. So thank you. This is a really serious time for us in terms of understanding that. I think I'd like to express thanks to Jackie, but also to our clinical director of teams who are looking at constant run rates, which is a very new experience for them in terms of their management processes. So this is a transitional year that is really challenging. So in terms of board decisions today, you want support for looking further, which we will give you. You want support for the negotiations and relationship once we go forward. And I think we're probably at the stage where we need to write, or I need to write to Part 12, outlining what we've done, what we've got to do, and what our proposals around the remaining, or at this stage, the 6 million gap that we've identified at this stage in the financial year. Is everyone happy if we proceed with that? And obviously we'll help drafting that, but I think the message is this is what we've got to. So I think I am new here, so I can say that I think we're in a better position this year than we've ever been in terms of the detailed analysis that finance committee has done. Thank you. I think we're in a better position in terms of our transparency with our department colleagues and therefore with Treasury. But we are trying to turn a tanker here in terms of not just our understanding and our spend, but also our process of budgeting, given all of the parameters that we discussed many times at the board about where we started from.
I think it's worth also noting that in terms of our cost improvement programme and the savings that we've delivered over 20 million in savings out of the system since Manx Care began, which is almost double our budgetary target. And what we're finding is that there are still savings, there are still opportunities, but we are now reaching those opportunities that take some time and quite a lot of effort to realise. And also in some areas, we are beginning to get to that basic structural base spend requirement in some areas. So the opportunities in some areas for further savings without significantly impacting service delivery are becoming more of a risk for us.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Do you want to comment?
I guess the only thing I would say is that, I think we have got, if I was to reflect over that 3-year period, just a standstill position, we spent £30 million just responding to pay awards over 3 years. We have spent £13 million on what I would call basic compliance and safety matters. So in our corporate areas, but predominantly in ensuring that we have safe staffing levels across our clinical services. And I think we see the benefit of that in terms of the quality of patient services that we are able to deliver and the outcomes that are being generated from that. We would never have been able to have described our tertiary position with such granularity had we not have made the investments in our performance and our data, and health and care is data driven. I also wish we had the opportunity to have our financial settlements over a 3-year period, because I think one of the key things that we have recognised, accepting the environment is challenging, is we still see lots of opportunity to affect change and transform, and for the system to look quite differently, and for costs to come out in that process over a much longer planning period. So, you know, whilst we've got a particular cost pressure here, and in this financial year, the organisation has consistently delivered £10 million worth of savings every year, broadly, and we're on track to deliver that again this year. The opportunity to have planned our finances over a 3-year, it's not lost on me, that would have given us a lot more leverage. It would have given us more certainty, more assurance, both internally and externally, and we could have kept pace and initiated perhaps more of the reform and transformation that the system desperately needs. You know, I think that's something which, you know, when we think of the context of the Sir Jonathan Michael's recommendations and the overall position, that was why he suggested, you know, funding over a 3-year planning horizon.
If I might, Chair, just to follow that on, if you think back to the Sir Jonathan Michael's and his funding formula, what in effect has happened is we have needed to use our growth funding that's designed to move forward, to fund legacy issues, to make necessary investments that Teresa's described, and to cover the gap between the inflationary rises that we've been awarded and actual inflation that we've experienced. And in addition to that, we've overachieved on our SIP. So I think whilst the bottom line looks rather bleak, I think when you look into the context of the journey that we've been on over the last 3 years, we've held our spend at inflation, and we've made all of these investments and made all of this progress and delivered all of those SIP savings. That's actually quite an achievement for a brand new organisation to make in such a short period of time. And the bottom line so far belies that, because we're not finished our journey yet.
Yes, I think this is, yeah, as all boards would say, it's a work in progress, but I think it genuinely is here. So thank you. I do think the multi-year supplement is an argument that we will continue to make, and I think we all in our various fora need to make it. I think it's a really important point. It's certainly something that Mr. Struting was talking about in England recently. So I think, you know, that we can lead the way in showing what the benefits of that are. But thank you. So I think this is going to be a crucial couple of months for us. Any other comments? Oh, just sorry, I should have come to you as chair of the PCC.
That's very kind, really. I think it's all been said, really. You know, I think that there's a danger here that you can overrate this. I mean, there's a lot of stress in the system. It's not in doubt. But you know, the journey we've been on has been very interesting, and that's a word I'm using carefully. You know, from our year of discovery to a difficult year to last year, COVID, and all the things that we faced. And at various board meetings, I've said things like, let's stop whinging, you know, let's get on with it, because we've got to work within our financial envelope. But the patient has been put on a real diet, and my worry is that we're actually straying into malnutrition now. Yeah. And my worry is that to be this slavish sort of task of bringing this in absolutely on budget, that we start to cut things that will actually lose us money in the long term. And the danger is it's all about short-termism. We've got to look 5-10 years out and set the scene for what this care system needs to look like in 10 and 15 years' time. And that's the work that we must not lose sight of, I think. And therefore my fear is that, you know, to slavishly keep on salami slicing, we will lose hearts and minds. We'll lose critical mass. We'll lose the forward movement of transformation that is key to this island's future. You know, in terms of attracting people here to work, in terms of making a lovely place to live, all of those things are so important and motivate us all. So, you know, I think we need to persuade our stakeholders of that argument, and we need to do it quickly.
Completely agree, Nigel. That's the point we're at.
Yeah, and that's a really well-made point that, you know, we're not, efficiency isn't about saving money, it's about doing things better. Yes. And actually, and we just had a real example with the Manx care record of, you know, simply short-termism of let's push this decision, let's not do anything, is actually going to cost us more money within a very reasonable time frame. But I think it's probably our professional role to remind colleagues of the short term versus the long term. And health and social care is always long term, it's lifelong. So I think that's where we will sit on this, but your points were made.
But I think just sorry to come back, Wendy, but I think it's important. You know, there is tension, and we get that, and you should have to work within a financial envelope. We all get that, but I think that there's a real danger here that we could lose that initiative and lose the gains that we've made over the years, and that could be so harmful to our community and to our island.
I agree.
And we're sort of almost, there's a fiduciary responsibility to get that right, as well as a contractual responsibility to manage the service.
Absolutely, but as always, wise words, Nigel, thank you. Anything else, Jessie?
No.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
So there are no items of other business. We've received some questions from the public, which we will answer. Much of them are around finances and the workforce position, so very pertinent and very helpful. In terms of the effectiveness of the meetings, I have my 6-month anniversary, so I've been thinking about this. I think I do think the deep dives are incredibly helpful, not just for those of us in this room, but externally as well, because they highlight elements of our business that perhaps sit behind a spreadsheet somewhere. And we are in the business of people. Finance is an enabler. All of the things we talk about, they are tools that enable us to deliver for people. So I do think that my reflection is that the deep dives are very helpful. I still think we have work to do on how we get an overview of performance as a board. And that's something that Oliver and I have been talking about, how that looks. I think the effectiveness of the committees and their feeding into the board is developing, and perhaps can go further. And all of this will shape what all of us say to the governance review when we start that. So thank you very much for today. Thank you for on screen. Apologies for missing your raised hands at times. I look forward to seeing everybody face to face in November.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheerio.
On the right. It's not for us, more accounting.
I'm on the night side. Sorry. Can I let Maria please? Just mindful of the I do actually own part of the